You are on assignment.
We'll keep increasing sanctions.
I like people coming here legally.
Now, a behind-the-scenes look.
Welcome to On Assignment. I'm Imran Siddiqui.
And I'm Maru Pandey. Coming up, tens of thousands of Syrians seek refuge in Lebanon. We'll speak with our reporter on the scene there.
Later, we'll hear about one man's struggle to rebuild his life after living on death row.
Aspiring entrepreneurs get hands-on experience in running a business while also learning about social and environmental responsibility.
And it's not what you say, it's how you present it when it comes to learning English. Let's go On Assignment.
The continuing conflict in Syria has sent tens of thousands of people fleeing for safety to neighboring countries, as many as 48,000 in Turkey alone.
Lebanon, too, has seen an influx of refugees. VOA United Nations correspondent Margaret Bashir spoke to several refugees in the northern city of Tripoli. She tells On Assignment that some of the refugees had to be smuggled out of the country.
Shakar used to work at the Syrian army base in Baba Amr in Homs.
We used to see the killing in front of us. We saw how they used to shoot randomly on demonstrators after Friday prayers. The army raided the houses. If they couldn't steal from the house, they would burn it down or kill its owner.
So Shakar decided she needed to get her 4 young children out of Homs. She decided to take the risk of being smuggled into Lebanon. Shakar says the rebels helped her for free, but others pay smugglers what is for them exorbitant sums to move their families across the border. A loose network of activists, rebels, and businessmen has been smuggling refugees out of Syria.
You also have people who have had problems with the government in Syria, and they've had to get out. We spoke to one doctor in a hospital in the north of Lebanon who told us that he was smuggled out because another doctor had been killed, and after this other doctor was killed, the government told him, you have 4 hours to leave the country. And so he kind of ran home, gathered up his wife and child and some money and some papers, and headed for the border, and the Syrian Free Army helped him get out. Sometimes you have poorer people who don't necessarily have identity cards, who don't have passports because they don't travel, so they don't have the necessary documentation to come into the country. So these are the people who are being smuggled.
What about the money? How do they get the money to get themselves smuggled out?
Well, I think in a lot of instances, people are giving property, they're giving jewelry, cars, things like that to the people who are smuggling them. One family told me it cost them $400 to be smuggled out, and I believe they were a family of 5. For some people, it's been very difficult to get the money together, but they either take their life savings and they use that, or they borrow money from relatives or friends, or they use, whatever little property they have. But I'll tell you that the refugees that we did meet are living here in really poor circumstances because they don't have any way to make money here.
Is there any way to gauge the number of refugees coming in? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing?
Well, the United Nations is keeping track of registered refugees, and they say more than 30,000 have registered with them, which in a country of only about 3.5 million people, it's significant numbers. Lebanon is a small country. Syria has about 22 million people. Lebanon has already absorbed over 30,000 registered refugees, but the United Nations is saying that that number is actually much higher. So you're looking at probably maybe 50,000 refugees or even more, perhaps.
And lastly, Margaret, what is the response of the people? I mean, how does it make them feel when they see their own president trying to kill them?
Hasna was a typical Syrian housewife, living in the countryside of Homs with her husband and 2 small children, until frequent army bombings caused them to flee 4 months ago. But when they thought it safe to return, tragedy struck. The family was hit by a rocket while riding on a motorbike.
My daughter was in my arms, and when the accident happened, she was blown out of my arms. It was a terrible feeling. I will never forget the sound of the rocket and the sound of my heart pumping and how we fell to the ground, and I started praying.
Hasna's children died instantly, her husband a short while later. She lost both her legs.
My legs are finished. I knew they were going to be cut.
Rebels helped her to travel from Homs to Tripoli in northern Lebanon, a trip that usually takes 2 hours. But it took 12 and involved numerous vehicles and her being carried by stretcher part of the way. Once in Lebanon, the Red Cross brought her to this hospital.
When you talk to people who've fled, sure, they're upset. They've had, tragedies in their families. They've been the victims of violence and in some cases torture and detentions. But some people still support the government, and I think it's quite considerable numbers still. I spoke to one man. This man was trying to explain to me about the Syrian Free Army, and when he was explaining it to me, I thought he was talking about the Shabiha, the gangs that the government sends out. And I said to him, "You mean the Shabiha?" And he said to me, No, the criminals, the thugs, the government's trying to fight them." And I said, "You mean the Free Army?" And he said, "What do you mean Free Army? They're not a Free Army. They're criminals and they're thugs." So there are definitely, and this was an educated businessman. So there are definitely segments of society that still support the president.
Margaret Bashir is VOA's United Nations correspondent. She spoke to us via Skype from Lebanon.
Just ahead, the true life story of a man's murder conviction and his ultimate redemption. You're watching On Assignment. Although the death penalty has been abolished in 141 countries, it continues to be a hot-button issue for supporters and opponents of capital punishment. In the United States, about 3,100 prison inmates are currently serving time on death row, according to the Washington-based Death Penalty Information Center. VOA reporter Tala Hadavi recently met a former death row inmate, one of about 130 who have been exonerated in the past 36 years. Hi, Tala. Thanks so much for joining us. You profile Suja Graham, who was convicted of murder and spent a number of years in prison, and many of which on death row. And then later he was exonerated. Tell us about how you met him, how you came upon his story.
So it was kind of a coincidence, actually, because I was looking for a story about the American justice system. I work for the Inside U.S. show at Persian News Network, and we were trying to look for something that was interesting. And I started doing some research, and what I really wanted to do was to actually go into a death row. But they've been really strict lately with letting media in there. So I was touching base with a lot of different organizations, talking to them, trying to figure out what to do about the story. So I talked to Kathy at the Witness to Innocence, which is the organization that Suja actually works for. He does a lot of speaking engagements there, and she recommended 2 people locally. And I had started thinking about going to Houston because there was another guy there. And so I got in touch with his wife, Phyllis, and we started talking, and I walked in there and I fell in love with the couple. It was, right away I knew this was going to be a great story.
Talk about his struggle.
So it's been very tough, and as you can see, he's very emotional. For the first 2 hours that we spent with him, he cried the entire time.
How long did he spend in prison, and then how long was it before he was acquitted?
He was in prison for actually 12 years, in and out of prison as a juvenile, and then he got life at the age of 18 for a robbery. And in prison, he got framed for a murder of a prison guard there, and that's how the whole death row came about.
Well, let's stop and take a look at his story real quick.
Okay.
Suja Graham's favorite Sunday activity is to take his grandsons to the creek where he took his own children. But Graham has struggled for most of his 62 years. He spent the first 11 years of his life in Louisiana's cotton fields. The next 7 he spent in and out of juvenile detention facilities. Then, a robbery conviction at age 18 put him in adult prison for life. He learned to read and write there and denounced his earlier criminal activities. But it was a time of vast prison overcrowding and rioting. Graham was later blamed for the murder of a prison guard. He tried to prove his innocence for the next 8 years. But after the second trial on the charge, he was sentenced to die.
This is me here.
Finally, after a 4th trial, he was acquitted of the murder, and his robbery conviction was also overturned.
He was a nurse in the jailhouse.
Since then, for 35 years, his mission in life has been to raise awareness about wrongful conviction.
No one can remove the psychological scars. No one can remove the physical scars. But Suja Graham can go on and make sure what happened to him never happened to anyone else.
Graham is an active member of Witness to Innocence, an organization that fights for total abolition of the death penalty. Last year, 43 prisoners were executed in the United States. Graham says there's not a day that passes that he's not reminded of what could have been.
Tala, I have to ask, how did he meet his wife?
So Phyllis was actually a nurse in prison, and they were exchanging letters amongst each other and spending hours and hours talking to each other as he was hoping to give her medicine and things like that. She was hoping to give him medicine and things like that. And then she had to actually quit work there, and she started working on his defense committee because it was deemed dangerous for her to stay there.
Wow. And then he got acquitted, and now he's...
Yeah, and they got married right after he got out,
Right out of
actually.
the
And
jail.
now they have 3 kids and 3 beautiful grandchildren and one on the way. So,
wow,
yeah.
that's a great story. Thanks so much,
Thank
Tala,
you
for
for having
being
me.
here and sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, don't go away. We'll be right back with a look at a U.S. program aimed at would-be entrepreneurs, teaching them business as well as ethics. Welcome back to On Assignment.
For some students, making money may be incentive enough to go into business, but an international program aimed at aspiring entrepreneurs encourages students to improve their communities while also making money. And that is through what the program calls the positive power of business. Students in Eastern Maryland are helping a Marina weather the storms of a weak economy. VOA reporter Monarabi spoke to On Assignment's Philip Alexio about it. Let's take a look at that.
Art Willis and his wife bought this marina on the Chesapeake Bay 35 years ago after a bad winter destroyed this and other marinas on Maryland's eastern shore.
If you can visualize all of the pilings, everything was destroyed, and we just had to pick it up piece by piece and put it back together again.
Now a weak economy is hurting his marina again.
It wasn't struggling, but in this day and age, virtually every business is challenged.
So business students from nearby Washington College, led by sophomore Dominique DiMarino, have come to help. They've created a green energy business plan to save Willis thousands of dollars. They're installing energy-efficient light fixtures and lowering his water use.
We're working with the electrician now, so hopefully in the next couple weeks.
It's all part of an international program called Students in Free Enterprise, or SIFE. It fosters social and environmental responsibility among future business leaders.
Monarabi, what are SIFE students learning with the organization that they don't normally get from college or their other education?
Well, both the organizers and the actual students were telling me that what SIFE does is to essentially take the theoretical learning they're getting in the classroom and putting it outside in a very concrete, real business setting. They're learning from real business people and business leaders. They're actually having to function in a real business environment and taking all that theory from the classroom and using it for real results.
And it's interesting that this Art Willis gentleman who's been running his marina for a while, but you have some of these young college students coming in, giving him some ideas. How has that been working?
Giving him fresh ideas, because Art has actually been running his marina for a couple of decades rather successfully, but when the recession hit, he realized he wasn't doing as well, and he wasn't thinking out of the box. What the kids were doing, were telling Art, think out of the box. Your marina is not just about renting out slips for boat owners to rent space in. You've got a whole range of green opportunities right there that you're not taking advantage of, like the oyster farm that they wanted to create for his marina, the green energy initiatives like reducing his electrical usage, reducing his water usage. Those were ideas that were actually off of his radar entirely.
Now, do the students take an idea that they learn from SIFE and help Art, or is this something where the students sort of come up with some of these ideas on their own because there are all these international competitions that the students get involved with? How does that normally work?
It was largely collaborative, but I was surprised at how much proactive decisions was happening actually from the students themselves. In other words, for the marina, they came to Art. They spoke to him, obviously, to find out what are your needs, what are your gaps. Right. They went back to literally to the table and drew up a business plan for him and then gave that presentation to Art. In other words, they came with the solutions for him.
Is going to be actually installing, these are T12 lights.
Tell me a little bit more about this Dominique DiMarino.
He is a sophomore at Washington College, president of the campus chapter of SIFE, and essentially led his small team of, I think, only about 10 people to helping Art with his marina.
DiMarino wants to run a real estate development company someday, but he says it won't be at the expense of the community he does business with.
You always can, I guess, do without ethics. You can always have, profits as the bottom line, and that's all you and your business care about. But, going that extra step and being moral is, the most important thing. And I see myself really focusing on that throughout my career.
By focusing on ethical business choices, future business leaders like DiMarino hope to improve their communities and the environment while still making money.
Now, SIFE is different from, say, an aid organization. Are they just focused mostly in it's more business-oriented, is that correct?
Yes, and that's actually quite crucial about SIFE and might separate it from many other similar programs and initiatives. They're not really interested in pure aid, or let's call it charity. What they want is to teach tomorrow's business leaders the positive power of entrepreneurism itself, that to make money doesn't mean harming your community or putting your workers into an unfair position.
They do run competitions all the time. So SIFE teaching business leaders how to run their business, which business is competitive. They have to be competitive within SIFE as well, right?
Right. They have regional, local, and then eventually an international World Cup. Crucially, you win by showing that you were actually able to effect positive change in that local community or for that local business.
Okay. VOA's Mona Robbie. Thank you. Very nice.
The VOA website is a great source of information for the latest news from around the world, and it can be read in a number of different languages: Burmese, Uzbek, Hausa, Urdu, and many, many more. But for those who want to learn or improve their English, VOA also offers an English learning program called The Classroom.
And that is by offering customized interactive lessons built around news articles from VOA's Special English webpage and broadcasts. Anyone in the world can learn English, and many do. On assignment's Lisa Vora talks with VOA's Marsha James about this innovative program.
I'm here with Marsha James, who is a multimedia producer for The Classroom, and we are out to lunch right now. Now, being out to lunch means we are having lunch, but there's also another definition.
Well, that's true, Lisa. We are out to lunch, but it's also an American expression that's used. And it's used pretty much to describe a person who doesn't have things in order or doesn't have their business in order. Sometimes it can also mean that a person isn't bright. So it's an American idiom used to just describe a person.
Gotcha, and we're definitely not describing us with this at all.
Absolutely not.
Out to lunch. Definition: not paying attention.
Explain to us what exactly is The Classroom.
The Classroom is about teaching English through interactive, engaging, and fun activities. We have various topics such as academic English, everyday English, and business English. Academic English allows students to learn topics such as how to take a test or note-taking 101.
Welcome to The Classroom's Note-Taking 101. There are many skills you'll need to learn in order to be successful at an American college.
Business English helps a person to learn about filling out forms or how to use small talk in business. And everyday English is how to take a taxi.
The best definition of hail a taxi is:
how would I order lunch?
Choose a meat, cheese, and bread for a sandwich.
You know what I love most about it? It's funny. It's fun.
She was so mad, she practically had a cow. Obviously, there was not a cow in the room when Linda came.
What does having a cow mean? Explain.
Okay, again, that's another idiom. And having a cow means a person that is about to have not so much a nervous breakdown, but maybe it's just overwhelmed with a lot of emotions at that moment. So it's something fun that people will say just as an expression, but literally that's not really what it is in American English.
My cousin actually just came here from the States, and one of the things that's been hardest for her, she knows English, that's not a problem, are idioms. She just told me a story this morning about being at a meeting and her boss said, "Heads up." And she just sat there and nodded her head the whole time because she had no idea what heads up was. So obviously there is a need for this.
There is a need for this, and the response has been great since The Classroom has started.
What's the date tomorrow?
We also teach on Facebook. We do social teaching. And so we have a lot of learners that are on Facebook, and we face teach, and they come every day, Lisa, to just talk with the navigator or the English doctor to hear what the lesson is for the day.
This is your website right over here.
This is the website.
So here's one that I find interesting, small talk.
Small talk.
You don't think about that. You never
don't.
think about that. What is appropriate and what's not appropriate?
The Classroom presents Small Talk in American Business.
Now, who writes these? All of you?
We write them together.
Small talk. After introductions, you'll need small talk. Small talk makes people feel comfortable before business or a serious conversation begins.
Very important.
Small talk has 3 parts: small talk topics, listening, and conversation practice.
Now, where do you
objectives
Do you
are
research to get this information? I'm just curious.
We
Like,
do
where do you go?
research. We do have English teachers that are actually on staff with us that help us to make sure that the information that we are putting out is how it should be in terms of pedagogically written.
Which are good small talk topics?
How's your week going? That seems appropriate. I'm going to go ahead and click it.
Okay.
So weather is great. Weather's always safe.
Always safe bet.
Okay, so do you have any plans for the weekend? You know, I feel like no, I'm not going to do that, because that seems like, what if they're having a party and you're not invited? That could get awkward. I'm going to say no.
Okay.
And I heard you lost your house. That's a no-brainer.
Almost. Please try again.
Okay. Apparently, having plans for the weekend is okay.
It is okay.
Alrighty.
It's small talk.
You learn something new every day.
You certainly do.
All right, well, have some lunch.
You can have some lunch.
Well, I'm already thinking about my weekend. Do you have big plans for yours?
I do. I'm going to go skydiving.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty exciting. I can't top that.
Really? That was a lie. I was just kidding. I'm just going to chill out at home, watch TV. That's all it.
That's fine. Whatever works for you, man.
Okay. Cool. As you know, Aru, many people learn English for business. French is known as the language of love, but Chinese, surprisingly, is fast becoming the language of tourism.
Well, not so long ago, Americans and Japanese tourists were the big spenders in France, but no longer. As Lisa Bryant reports from Paris, the French are now headed back to the classroom to learn Chinese.
Teacher Meifen Chen swears it's easy to learn Mandarin, the official language of the Chinese mainland. One of her students is a journalist. Another is just curious about China. The third, business owner Julie Antonello, travels frequently to China.
Because I go there really often, so I just wanted to understand and try to help myself sometimes to go to take a taxi or to take a coffee.
French are not just doing business in China. Chinese business is coming to France. Today, about 500,000 Chinese visit France every year. With incomes rising in China, middle-class Chinese like this group of teachers can now afford to go abroad. English teacher Chester, that's his Western name, is enjoying Paris in a language he understands.
We see some Chinese, some signs in Chinese, everywhere.
One reason, Chinese tourists are major shoppers, accounting for a quarter of all duty-free business, according to shopping group Global Blue. Department stores like Galeries Lafayette hire Chinese-speaking staff. Interest in the Chinese language is also growing. Roughly 30,000 French students now study Mandarin, making it more popular than Russian and Portuguese. Some French business schools make learning Mandarin mandatory. Independent instructor Meifen Chen says her student body has soared in recent years.
L'intérêt c'est immense, c'est-à-dire maintenant la Chine devient un pays très ouvert.
The interest is immense. Today, China is becoming very open. It is the second economic power.
Chen says her classes are not all hard work. Every one of her students becomes passionate about the Chinese language, she says, without exception. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Paris.
And that's a wrap of this week's show. See you next week as we take a look at former President Bush's recent trip to Africa for the opening of a cancer screening clinic.
Till then, check us out on the web at voanews.com, Facebook, and YouTube. Thanks for watching On Assignment.